Hello, everyone, and welcome to a very exciting discussion. I've been waiting such a long time to talk about Doctor Who on this channel, and it is finally time we're able to talk about it. We have the 60th anniversary coming up, and we're going to go through and discuss today pretty much the whole of the revival era, so everything from 2005 onwards, and have a good old kind of chinwag about everything Who. I'm joined today by Dan and Sam. Say hi, Dan and Sam.
Hi, Dan and Sam.
Nice to see everyone.
How are we both doing today? We good?
Yeah, very good, very good. I'm not like you, Tate. Excited to talk Doctor Who. It's not something that I've talked about really in length for a long time. So I think it's a great time to be a Whovian, I think.
Definitely, yeah. Most people tell me to be quiet when I start talking about Doctor Who, so it's really nice to be with like-minded people who love to speak about it.
And of course, the hype train is properly chugging along right now. We're recording this the day before, but when this is uploaded, the Doctor Who will be 60. I know that the first episode, I've been reading up on it today. Apparently it was delayed by like 80 seconds because of the JFK assassination the day before. But it was like the first episode came out at about 5 or 6-ish, around about that time, on the 23rd of November, all the way back in 1963, which is, I mean, it's the longest running sci-fi show of all time. Is it the longest running TV show of all time to go along with that? Has it taken that title as well?
Not just yet, no.
Not just yet. Getting there. Getting
there soon.
I think Corrie's definitely past Coronation Street. I don't know if there's anything else that's been that's lasted without any breaks or anything either. I'm not too sure.
But we're not going to be talking about Classic Who today because I'll be perfectly honest. I've seen some of Classic Who. I know that Classic Who is now available online on BBC iPlayer for us in the UK, and it's available. Is it available on Disney Plus and in the States, or is it just UK that's being based in?
Just UK at the moment. It's going on to something called Tubi in the States, I believe.
But we do have all of the revival era. So ever since 2005, when it was rebooted and reincarnated, regenerated, if you will, into this modern Doctor Who era. And with the news this week, Russell T Davies said, we're entering into a new era of Doctor Who. This is no longer going to be attached. So this is its own entity. We can talk about it as a whole. And they're starting afresh by throwing in one of the old faces, which makes absolutely no sense. But when has Doctor Who ever made complete sense? I'm just going to go very quickly through our socials because we want to start a discussion with everyone as well. We want people to talk about their favorite Doctor Who moments, their favorite memories from anything from 2005 onwards. So please comment below with your thoughts on that. Who is your favorite Doctor? Who are your favorite companions? Any favorite episodes? Any memories with Doctor Who or anything like that that stands out for you? Please comment below. We want to create a discussion down there. And also, please go and follow us on our link tree that is down in the description as well. So go and do that, where you'll find all of our social links. And we will be discussing through all of the episodes when they come out. So I'm pretty sure the time slot we put down for that is 9 p.m. on the Saturday, where we're going to be going through and just talking about it at maybe 8 p.m. I will make sure that is put up on the socials as well for everyone. So let's get into it. I've got an intro question for both of you. So I'm going to come to Sam first. Mm-hmm. When did you fall in love with Doctor Who, and what was your first ever Doctor Who episode?
Okay, so I mean, I feel like as people based in the UK, I think and especially around our age, aware of what Doctor Who was before the revival came back. So I think there's always a thing where there's a TARDIS to the police box, the Daleks, all these things they reference so many times. I mean, the amount of Simpsons episodes that had like a Tom Baker reference or what appeared before the revival came back. It's just one of those things that you always knew, and they'd throw like a Peter Cushing Dalek film on an ITV. So it's like it was always there. And then the revival came on, and I wasn't even interested. I didn't actually start watching it until 2006, and I think partially it was because Billie Piper was in it, and I was used to her as the singer, and so I was like, she's going to be in Doctor, and it didn't appeal to me for whatever reason. But my cousins said that we're so hyped up about Billie Piper leaving and about how big it was going to be. And I was like, okay, I'll watch that. So the first episode I watched was Doomsday, of all episodes to watch first. And I really enjoyed it. So then I went back and watched the rest of series 2, then went back and watched series 1. And then the first episode I watched Boy Brides. So yeah, and I it was pretty much instantaneous. Like as soon as I started watching it, it was like I've got to get a TARDIS console, a TARDIS interior playset. I've got to get the DVDs. Like it was very quick. And then I was on message boards and looking at, I can't even remember the websites like you would used to find like filming things and spoilers and all of that. So yeah, it was very, very quick.
That's fascinating. I was like, okay, so he's going to say, okay, I came in with Rose, and then you're like, no, I came in with Doomsday. I was, whoa, completely thrown for it. Dan, when did you fall in love with Doctor Who, and what was your first episode?
Yeah, so similar. I always had a kind of understanding of what the TARDIS was, the Daleks, way before I started watching. Knew who I started from Aliens of London, World War III. So I started about midway through the Eccleston era, and then just religiously watched every week from there on, and absolutely loved it. Definitely.
So those episodes gave me nightmares as a kid. So that's I was always scared that, like random people walking through the street. I was like, oh, could they be an alien? I was like, so scared. For myself, a really fun backstory. I had absolutely zero idea what Doctor Who was, but my dad told me about it and said, hey, we're going to be watching this show. It's called Doctor Who. It's coming back onto TV. I'm not actually sure how much he watched of the original series. But the big thing for us was that Billie Piper was going to be in Doctor Who. And that's because about 2 streets away was where she grew up, and that was her house. My sister used to play with her sisters. We went to the same schools all the way through. So she is like a local hero for us. The fact that she lived so close and she was going to be on the TV and stuff like that, it was really crazy. So I came in on Rose. I was in from the very, very start. I sat down in my old kind of, lounge area and watched it and loved it. And from there, I was immediately hooked. It was just straight away, immediate fan. And yeah, I've been trying to watch every single episode live when it comes out ever since. Through the good and the bad, I have stuck with Doctor Who, and it may be my favorite TV show of all time. It's just so fantastic, and it evokes emotions in me. I mean, I've wanted to see what props I could put around the room and stuff like that. I can't put the giant photo I've got of David Tennant and Billie Piper up. I've got 2 TARDISes here. I have a Dalek in the background over there. So I've at least decorated the room for today's event, at least. So let's start off with the Eccleston era. Eccleston came in after the 1996 film with Paul McGann. Large break. Through various different reasons, the show got canned, and, there was the dark kind of days of, no Doctor Who for a long time and people not knowing whether it would come back or not. Russell T Davies, who had worked on, I'm pretty sure he worked on Queer Folk. I'm not actually sure what else he'd worked on before that as well. Came on in. We got Christopher Eccleston, and we got a very interesting kind of, quite a dark Doctor looking back on it now, to reintroduce the fans to and stuff like that. He does have that cartoonish nature about him, and he's always smiling and stuff like that, but looking back on the episodes now, though, his portrayal of it is very dark, kind of almost post-traumatic stress disorder from the Time War, which is this new kind of plot they brought in, which they've kept throughout kind of as part of the canon for most of Doctor Who moving forwards. But I just wanted to get kind of your thoughts on Chris Eccleston's time on the show from both of you. So we'll start with Sam.
Yeah, so originally Eccleston didn't draw me in, so to originally watch his series, and maybe it's because when you have that imagery of someone like a Tom Baker or a John Pertwee who visually seem very kind of enticing as a lead character, whereas Christopher Eccleston was very much, I look kind of like normal in terms of dress sense and how he acted. And so, yeah, originally it was a bit difficult for me to kind of even think about watching his episodes. But of course, after I started watching the show and went back to his, it was very interesting to kind of get a very complex character from the get-go. And I think that's what's the good thing about Doctor Who sometimes, is that you'll get kind of, especially when you enter a new era, you kind of sometimes need to have something that which is a little bit more grounded, which I know is difficult for a show like Doctor Who to be grounded, but to have something like the Time War, which ultimately created a lot of good storylines and a lot of good character moments for the Doctor and the people around them. It's interesting, but I love his relationship with Rose and how he develops. You know, the first episode makes the audience believe that he hasn't long since regenerated, or he's still quite fresh in this new body, and that he's really trying to relearn after going through something. We don't know at the very beginning what that is, but we learn more. And despite him only being there for 13 episodes, he really kind of stands out. And, you know, for many, he's at the bottom, at least of New Who in terms of the rating, just because he didn't get a lot of time. But I think a lot of people, and I can imagine, you know, like you both, as kind of your first Doctor, you know, on screen, it's a lot of good memories. And, you know, he's got a lot of fantastic episodes, which I think really helps too.
Dan?
Yeah, I'd agree. When I was first watching it, probably because how young I was, a lot of it kind of went over my head. I wasn't immediately attached to Eccleston. It was more as I've grown older and rewatched and revisited that era, I've appreciated just how well the writing is. I don't think there's a bad episode among them all. I mean, the Doctor dances, The Empty Child are still up there as some of the best ones of modern Who. I love them. And definitely Christopher Eccleston, you can see the passion he had for it at the time. It's a really good era. I'd challenge anyone to find a bad story out of those 13 episodes, I'd say.
Yeah, I was looking back through today, because I wanted to watch a few episodes over the last week just to kind of get my head back into Who, and you know, I wanted to go through some of the better episodes from, you know, New Who and this kind of since the show come back, and I looked through his list of episodes and I was like, there isn't really an episode that I dislike here. There's definitely some that are better than others, and I think probably his weakest episode would probably be the long game, as I just couldn't get on board with it. But you need the long game to have the finale, which I think is some of Eccleston's kind of best acting, and you need that setup. And it was so fun because Doctor Who previously had done very, you know, apart from Trial of the Time Lord, I think they hadn't really done a seasonal arc. It had been just kind of 3 or 4 things as part of an episode, and then on to the next adventure, and then on to the next adventure. Whereas this one had a nice long kind of string of different things coming together to lead towards the finale, little breadcrumbs kind of laid out. And that's down to, you know, Russell T Davies and, you know, the team trying to get the show back on the road, and having an overall arc, I'm guessing, made it a lot more appealing for the public to kind of get on board, because you have to tune in every single week. He does go on an adventure to this new planet, to this new time period or whatever on a weekly basis, but you have to get the whole story involved to be able to kind of fully understand the show. So I really enjoyed that kind of creative side of things. Let's talk about the companion. I guess I did put down 2 companions here because we did get Adam for like 1 episode, but like we don't really, you know. But main companion Rose, who, I mean, the impact that she had on the show, and I know that she was the first companion back, but the way that they've used her throughout the series, and you know, she continues on with Tennant into the next era, and you know, she's a kind of character that is kind of synonymous now with a phrase, bad wolf. If you hear bad wolf, you're immediately thinking, well, Rose has to be involved, or at least the end of the universe has to be involved. But the impact she had on the show at the time was phenomenal. Like instant stardom. I know she was a music star beforehand, but instant stardom as far as acting was concerned. And even though I had that own personal connection to her, I feel like she did such a great job of, you know, being such an ordinary person thrown into such an unordinary world. And that kind of doe-eyed look on the world, but also the kind of fierce bite back that she gave it. And the way that she develops throughout the series, I think, was fantastic. To quote Eccleston himself. But yeah, I just wanted to know what your thoughts were, because, you know, out of all of the other Doctors that we've had in this new era, realistically, Eccleston, I know he's only in for one series, but he's the only one who's only had one companion. Everyone else is, there's a few, you know, that we can talk about. But really, when you think of Eccleston, you have to go with Rose Tyler as well, along with it.
Yeah, I mean, it must have been a really difficult thing, and I think that's what I try and think of when it comes to the first series back. Anyway, is that, you know, it's you're really risking everything to go off from a cancelled series for 16 years before. Like, there's a lot resting on everyone's shoulders. So, and the companion role there are some negative connotations with that, and there are people who will look down at a character like that. So it must have been a lot of pressure. But I think they made the right choice by, you know, having someone from the modern, you know, time, modern world, contemporary, to actually join the Doctor. And I think there was a tendency in the past to go more with, oh, we might have a modern one, but we'll also just get someone from the far future or someone from the past. I think it makes a lot of sense to bring people in through the eyes of the companion, which hadn't really been done that effectively or that deeply before. And to have a companion who has a mother and who has a life, a boyfriend, it I think made viewers gravitate towards her much more quickly than they would have had it been from just the Doctor's perspective. So to have Rose as the central character, really, in episode 1, I think was the best thing for the show, and I think they really, you know, hit the ground running. And, you know, there's a few companions who kind of, you know, work outside of anything. You know, they'll always be referred to as kind of the core companions of Doctor Who, and there's maybe only a handful or two of them, and Rose is one of them because of the impact that she had. Anyone else, it could have been a disaster. You know, we never know, but we're very lucky. We're very lucky that, you know, I'm lucky that I was proven wrong about Billie Piper, that she did such an amazing job, such a great performance, with someone who's, you know, got a lot of different sides to her. And I think there's been a little bit of a tendency as well for people to dog on her a little bit and kind of critique her negatively, which I think some things are valid, but I think overall what the character did for the show and what the character did for the Doctor and the experiences had, there's a great benefit. And so, yeah, I look back really fondly at her time, and I think there's a reason why, you know, Billie Piper was brought back in the 50th anniversary over so many other characters who could have come back, and there's a reason why people want her to come back again, because she's incredibly iconic.
Dan?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I remember the newspapers and the news in general back in 2005 when it was announced that Billie Piper was taking on the role. There was a lot of criticism against her. She's a singer, she can't act. She's going to be awful, it'll be cancelled. How wrong they were. The amount of pressure Chris Eccleston and Russell must have been under at the beginning before that first episode went out. It must have been huge. But luckily, there was very little backlash once those first couple of episodes had gone out up against her. She won everybody over into how she's such a perfect companion for this modern era, because people related to her. They were seeing the Doctor and his life through her eyes. And I'd say it was a perfect formula, because it's still continuing to this day. And if you asked a person who was just a casual watcher of the show, not a huge fan like we were, there's probably only two companions they'd be able to name off by heart: Sarah Jane and Rose.
Yeah, that's actually very, very... I mean, maybe there's a shout in there for Donna if she's coming back for the specials, but even then, I don't think that her legacy will come anywhere near to what Billie Piper did for the show. I know a lot of people would have come back on with, you know, that Rose episode and stuck with it, or at least people would go back and they'd get that connection to that character, as she was the one who kind of brought it forwards. And same with, you know, Eccleston himself playing Nine. You know, they were such a good kind of duo on screen, and I really enjoyed kind of the energy they had together. Sometimes, you know, and we'll talk about it probably a little bit later on, but the companions don't really mesh too well with the Doctor, and I feel like maybe they would work better with a different one. But I feel like in that era they just had such good chemistry on screen. I will say though, still not a fan of the romantic element that was brought in at the end of the Parting Ways, but that kind of continued on to Tennant era, and we'll talk about that when we get into the Tennant era itself. Very quickly, this is going to be a proper boom 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 rapid fire thing. I want you to name your favorite episode from our Ninth Doctor, or episodes if they are attached together, if it's one big story, and also your favorite Doctor moment. So I'll do the example as the first one. So my favorite episodes from this era were The Empty Child and The Doctor Dances. I was very close to picking Dalek, but I went with the double in the end, especially for introducing the character of Captain Jack, who I guess is a companion across multiple Doctors, so it's very difficult to know when to talk about him. But he was introduced in this series. For some strange reason in my head, I always relate to him as more of kind of a Tennant era thing, but that's because I binge watched through Torchwood recently, and that's set between the different series in itself. But my favorite Doctor moment is the Bad Wolf speech versus the Daleks, basically saying that he's going to come and save Rose Tyler, he's going to wipe out the Daleks. I think that is a moment where, you know, we see the Doctor being incredible and, you know, brave and staring down the face of death and basically spelling out exactly what the Doctor should do in that situation. And I think that's his defining moment as the Doctor.
Okay, so I mean, my favorite episodes are basically right after yours. So mine's either, and it might shock, either Boomtown or Bad Wolf, just because I love when there's more than one companion. I love when there's more of an entourage, which I know Sarah Jane references to in series 2. But
we need to talk about Mickey then as well, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, Mickey the idiot, but yeah, I love the dynamic when there's more of a larger group there. I mean, it's probably better when there's just 2 companions rather than 3, because we know it can get a little bit messy. But I think with those episodes in particular, it's just nice to kind of see how people interact with each other. With Boomtown, yeah, I could very easily just pop on Boomtown and just be like, I don't need to worry. It's very chill for me to watch. But then something like Bad Wolf, I get so much entertainment out of the Doctor, Captain Jack and Rose's separate stories, but then also kind of the deeper things that go on within there, and also the references to TV shows that are actually all back apart from Trini and Susanna, but but yeah. So I love those episodes, and then I guess the best Doctor moment for me. I've actually put kind of his interactions with Linda in those last 2 episodes, and also Jabe in The End of the World. I really like with Eccleston in particular how he really has these kind of more intimate moments with some characters, and the way he changes a little bit, and how he gets a little bit more vulnerable with certain people who he has like an instant connection with. And he has that with those 2 characters. With Jabe, she has an understanding of who he is and that he shouldn't exist. And with Linda, it's that wonder that the Doctor loves when, you know, a person is just so positive about an outlook, even though things might not be so great, and the assets and attributes that make him want to show someone everything that's out there. And with both of those characters, you see the absolute sadness in Eccleston's face when both of them die, and kind of something that he himself couldn't actually stop. And if he wasn't there, they would have died anyway. And then you see that later on in Tennant's, where, you know, you have the flashbacks and those 2 characters are in there. It shows that they actually made an impact. So yeah, those moments I think really stick with me.
All good choices. It's going to be tough to follow those. I'd definitely say my favourite episodes are the Doctor Dances and The Empty Child, just because of how fantastically written they are. They're pretty spooky even to this day, which is great. I'd say my favourite Doctor moment for the era, though, is a mix between the two. It would be at the end of those episodes where the Doctor says he's in the train yard. He says, "Just this once, everybody lives," because you can see how happy he is just because of that. And it is rare for in an episode for everybody to live, as we know. Or in the Bad Wolf, when the Doctor thinks the android has disintegrated Rose, and you can just see the pain on his face and the lengths he'd go to breaking out of the security area, grabbing a gun and going up to the top floor. Like, you can see how angry he was and just what he'd do because he thinks Rose is dead, and like what relationships do mean to him. It just sums him up, especially after he thinks he's destroyed his entire race. It's perfect.
Excellent. Really good choice across the board. It seems like we all seem to love Eccleston as Nine, but Nine was not long for this world. He regenerated into David Tennant as the 10th Doctor after just one series. I want to say he was quoted on record saying that he didn't want to be typecast into the role, which I think over the years there's been this unusual relationship between Doctor Who and Christopher Eccleston, because he came back for the 50th special, but not in the way that, other people came back for the 50th special. It's like he's almost distanced himself from it, and any opportunity for him to come back into the show, he hasn't really taken. I'm not too familiar with Big Finish and all the stuff they've done with that. So I don't know if either of you can kind of clue into that as well. Has he done many stories for that, or has he also distanced himself from that as well?
No, he still does Big Finish. The typecast was sadly a rumor.
Was it a rumor? Oh, okay.
He's become much clearer. He stuck to his guns and didn't speak about it for a long, long time. It's only the past few years where he's come out and said actually he had problems with how people were treating other people on set, how people were acting. And when he reported those to the higher ups, meaning Russell and Julie, they brushed it under the carpet and so he didn't want to work with them. Agreed nicely that he'd still promote the show, and somehow the BBC, without his permission, announced he was leaving and gave that incorrect quote, which then meant he was blacklisted for a long time from BBC shows.
Well, that quote seems to have stuck. That's really bad, at least from my perspective, having that kind of view of it. Interesting, especially when over the last kind of few years, certain actors from that era have been, they've been talked about, and we won't get into that today. We won't get into that. Maybe another time we'll talk about it.
He has gone on record since then saying like he loves Big Finish because of the quality of the writers, and he absolutely loves going to conventions and fan events purely because the amount of people that go up to him and say he was their first Doctor or he's inspired them to get into TV work. So he's definitely still holds a love for the show.
I really want to see him back on screen, even if it's just just a cameo appearance or something like that. I know that with Jodie Whittaker's kind of final episode, we had a lot of the past Doctors coming back and having a very small scene, which was really nice to watch. But we'll move on. We'll move on to the 10th Doctor now. So this is Tennant era Mark 1, as he is coming back as the 14th Doctor in the upcoming specials. So we kind of have to, talk about this as if like, oh yeah, this is his incarnate Doctor. I wonder if it'll be different characteristics because it is a completely different Doctor. He's just playing the same character. When we get to the reviews of the Star Beast, Wobbler Yonder, and the Giggle, we will talk about all of that. But David Tennant came on. The only thing I knew from him beforehand was Casanova. And that seems to have kind of stuck with his character role. The one note I've put here is he's more modern and he's a romantic Doctor. He's kind of the heartthrob Doctor. He's the one who whisks people away on an adventure, shows them the universe, and people seem to pine over him. And is kind of the main character trait. He does a lot of speeches. He does a lot of running away from things. He has a mean streak as well, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But I just wanted to hear, because I mean, he stayed on for 3 series and a bunch of specials. What kind of your thoughts were on David Tennant's first stint in the show?
Yeah, so Tennant is technically my first Doctor in terms of who I watched, you know, and all of that. It's I'm trying to like think back to how I thought of him at the time, but for me it felt more like a natural fit. As a child, he felt very much more like someone that I could see as the Doctor, and he had all these different like every Doctor does, but every side of him I could, you know, get on board with. If he was being light and funny, I enjoyed it. When he was being dark, I could enjoy that. When he was being really emotional, you know, I really felt that too. So everything that he did, David Tennant is fantastic. Anyway, and you know, he's such a contrast to Eccleston's portrayal. Yet he still carries. I think that the best thing about that any Doctor can do is when they can just carry a little bit of their previous, you know, incarnations with them. And so everything that the heaviness that Eccleston had, Tennant took it with him, but it wasn't maybe always, you know, on his shoulder. There was a lot of, you know, enjoyment and fun, much more than Eccleston did have. Although it's not like I'm saying Eccleston was gloomy or anything. He definitely lightened up as, you know, the series went on. But yeah, and as we had 3 series with Tennant, you know, there was so much more that we could get from him, so many different types of story, his interactions with different characters and companions. You know, I will say, you know, him and Donna together is my favorite pairing of all of them. So that series 4 in general is probably my favorite series of Doctor Who anyway. I think, you know, for me, there's nothing bad in that. Even though I was speaking to one of my friends this week who is watching all of Series 4 right now, and he did say that The Unicorn and the Wasp was a terrible episode, and I highly disagree. Highly disagree. I was very, very angry about that. But yeah, I love the fun. For me, Doctor Who, if we get to the core, is about the fun and the adventure for me. And when there's no romantic stuff in there, when it is just about we're gonna have a great time, see these different worlds, or go back in time, or go into the future and just enjoy ourselves, and then, you know, always, you know, meet some monsters. I think that's for me is the best part of it. So series 4 was kind of like the peak, and a lot of that was because of Tennant's performance.
Yeah, definitely, I'd agree with all of that. I mean, Tennant, he definitely was. It was the time when it hit peak popularity in the UK, I'd say. You know, he's probably many people's favorite Doctor. But just the wide range of emotions that the character goes through is David Tennant, whether that's romance with Rose, heartbreak, completely ignoring Martha, sadly, to finally finding a friend and then losing him in Donna. It's brilliant. Some of my favourite stories are from that era. Again, testament to the acting and the writing. It's top quality.
Yeah, this era was interesting because we see David Tennant act in so many different ways. The big one, and this is the big critique, I guess, that a lot of people have for this era, is the romance. They went heavily with the romance angle with Rose, and it did create for some good drama with the loss, but it did lead to a series where Martha was kind of overlooked as a companion, and I actually think that she's probably one of the most versatile and strongest companions of the entire show, but I feel like she was underused and misused, if that makes sense. She, as far as the character itself is concerned, she is one of the best of them, yet I don't think we see her full potential, which is a crying, dying shame. Freya Agyeman is a fantastic actress. Donna is where the show really, and I'm glad that they're kind of coming back to Donna for the specials, where the show became fun again, and it became, you know, more like an adventure series. And from the stuff, because this was about the time where I was like, okay, I like this. I want to go back and watch a bit of Classic Who. So that's when I started to watch a couple of episodes of Classic Who and stuff like that. And that looking through the Donna series with Tennant, that's where I was like, this is the most like classic Who. This is like going on an adventure to somewhere. There's danger and peril, but it's like, it's just people in a spaceship going off and having these amazing adventures and journeys. So that's where it kind of clicked with me. We'll go through best episode, and I've kind of split. This is annoying for me, at least. I couldn't decide which one was my favorite episode, so I'm going to throw out a few kind of, you know, ones where it's like, oh, this episode's great, this episode's great. So an episode with Rose, which I really liked, Girl in the Fireplace. I think that is a fantastic episode as far as a kind of historical, but also at the same time space adventure episode. Human Nature and Family of Blood with Martha, I think, is one of David Tennant's best performances in the entire show. With Donna, Science of the Library, Forest of the Dead, especially for what it was able to set up going forwards. But I mean, my favorite episode overall is probably Water of Mars. And my favorite Doctor Who moment is Time Lord Victorious, because that kind of led me into watching more dramas and stuff like that. Seeing Tennant's performance in that led me down the route of, oh, I like this kind of more serious angle. This really kind of the darkest, almost the darkest moment in Doctor Who history. I want to go down that route, and it got me into a bunch of other, you know, dramas and stuff like that at the time. I'll always come back to that episode and always come back to that moment as being like a key point in Doctor Who. And I do hope we get to see some inkling of the Time Lord Victorious when Tennant comes back.
Yeah, I was pretty much in the same boat as you. Is that it's very difficult to choose one. So I do have a
Pick
few
them all.
I do have a few too, but I mean, I'd say School Reunion I love because of Sarah Jane and K9. I absolutely adore that episode. Girl in the Fireplace probably is my favorite of kind of like the actual series. Anyway, I absolutely love it. I love the mix of the future and the past, and you know, I think Stephen Moffat's episodes during Russell T Davies era are some of the best. You know, so I love that. Utopia, I think, was a great episode for series 3. Again, I like having an additional companion there with Captain Jack, but then also the reveal at the end. I think it's probably one of the best cliffhangers the show has done. I think what we lose in modern Who or a new Who is the cliffhanger, because you don't get one every week. I think that's something that people always, you know, looked back to classic Who, is that, oh, every week there was a cliffhanger. But Utopia's cliffhanger is one of my absolute favorites. And then series 4, probably Midnight. I think that's to me probably one of the best episodes. I mean, regardless of my own, you know, subjective nature, I think objectively it's one of the best episodes of Doctor Who. And you know, that is absolutely terrifying. And I think Tennant's performance in that is maybe his peak performance. But Water of Mars 2, it is. The weight between Planet of the Dead and the Water of Mars was insane, especially because you knew that Tennant was going to be going and you knew it was all leading up. And just his performance in that, and that's when my favorite performance is also from the Waters of Mars. It is when he's talking to Adelaide and then he leaves, and you get that montage of what's going on at Biobase 1, and then he's so struggling with what to do. He doesn't want to leave, but knows he has to. I just think the whole episode is so intense. And I was so nervous watching that episode.
That episode was a real roller coaster.
It really was. So I actually can't wait to watch it again, but I'm also like, oh no. I do have to say, quick fun fact though, when I watched what was it, The Stolen Earth, I actually recorded that episode on VHS off the telly just because I wanted to watch it, because I knew it was going to be big, and I was like, I need to watch this straight away. And I still had a VHS record it in my bedroom. I had a DVD player, but I also had that. I was like, I just need to record this. So that's probably one of the last things I ever recorded on VHS.
Yeah, again, it's so tough to just choose one story. I think my favourite's definitely The Waters of Mars, Midnight, Human Nature, Family of Blood, and then one that I wasn't that keen on to begin with, but looking back, rewatching it, and I really like it. The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. They're top quality stories. But my favourite Doctor moment, definitely from The Waters of Mars, where everything's exploding around him. The base is on its way out, and he realises he's the last of the Time Lords. He can do what he wants. and just the anger he puts into that. The portrayal is great, and you can see the fear in Adelaide's eyes when she realizes this is the person that controls the universe essentially, and that no one should have that kind of power. And then when she gets dropped back home and she has to shoot herself to put the timelines back again, you can really see in Tennant's face the pain as he realizes what he's actually done. There, it sets up the whole Time Lord Victorious storyline really, really well.
Yeah, and a lot of love there for the Waters Mouse. I want to just throw this out there because no one mentioned it, but Blink was also still the highest rated episode of Doctor Who, so it'd be amiss to not mention it. I think its effect over the years has been dimmed down because I think for me personally, there's only been 2 good Weeping Angel stories, maybe pushing 3. But realistically, I think that they've been misused since their introduction. Great introduction. I mean, Carey Mulligan, brilliant performance. It's a Doctor Light episode, not much Doctor in the episode itself. But it is regarded as the highest rated Doctor episode, so I had to mention it in here. Otherwise, we may get a few angry commenters. But after Time Lord Victorious and after David Tennant's kind of, final 2 episodes, which at one point on the channel, I argued for being the greatest TV moment of all time, him not wanting to let go of his character. My views have changed slightly on that since now, knowing that he's actually coming back to the role. But after that, we not only had a change in Doctor, but we also had a showrunner change for the first time. Mr. Moffat, who we have mentioned in pretty much every single episode that he's done, which has been good up until this point, we've mentioned. So I know we've mentioned Empty Child. I know we mentioned what other episodes did he do in this time? He did
Blink.
He did Blink, didn't he? Yeah, he's done some of the better episodes of New Who up until this point. So they were like, okay, Rusty Davies is going off, and we're going to bring in a new showrunner, and he was the first choice to come back in. Very different kind of approach to the show, where kind of Russell T Davies went for kind of serialized and kind of not quite soap drama level kind of ness, but he went for that kind of angle of extreme emotion, very contained stories with that thin line running through. With Stephen Moffat, it's a fairy tale. Everything is based around a fairy tale, and he was the one who introduced mystery boxes into Doctor Who. Everything has to be really complicated. The finales, at least for my opinion, have to be kind of like not solved until the last second. And as much as looking back on this era, I enjoyed it, and I enjoyed him as a showrunner. And actually, I look back on it now and think, well, all my criticisms at the time, they were maybe a bit too harsh. Maybe it was because I loved Russell T Davies so much. But it's a very interesting kind of change of style for the show. And we get introduced to Matt Smith, who genuinely, was he in Skins or something like that? Like he was in one thing before this and that was it, like an episode or something like that in the background of Skins. I didn't know who he was. I had no idea who he was coming in as the new Doctor. He went for a very kind of goofy, kind of over-the-top portrayal of the Doctor. I really liked him from the off as like a kind of going with the whole fairy tale vibe and, meeting a young Amelia Pond, who we'll talk about in a bit as well. But he stayed on for the show for 3 series, plus the anniversary special as well, before his time was up as a Doctor. What are your thoughts on this, on Stephen Moffat era, and what are your thoughts on kind of the Matt Smith era coming in as 11?
So this is when I get a bit mixed on the show. I do think part of it was definitely because, when you're so big on a show as it is, when it changes, it is going to be an adjustment. And I was quite excited, actually, just because Stephen Moffat had a great set of episodes, behind him. Matt Smith, some people are always too young, but I mean, when he was announced, I remember thinking, because by that point I'd watched some of Classic Who, and Peter Davison was and is my favorite Classic Who Doctor, and he was the youngest one there. So in my eyes, I was like, that doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing, and there's a lot of energy that can come with that. and he did say he was basing a lot of, so at least some of his character off of Patrick Troughton, who was very bouncy, and you can see it in his performance where he's drawn that from. And to me, that shows a lot of intelligence, as as an actor, to kind of go, let's take this and maybe twist it or do this with it. So I think him and Amy, Karen Gillan, were absolutely spectacular throughout it. I think my issues probably were with the theming. Series 6 is, for me, is a real lull for me. Series 5, I enjoyed a lot of it, but then there was elements of it that I wasn't totally on board with. For me, I think the fairy tale theme was kind of difficult to get on board with, especially with a show like this, where there's a lot of facts, and we're doing this, and this looks a certain way, and so. But I appreciated how they were trying to do it through kind of having a young Amelia Pond growing up and kind of utilizing that at the beginning and the end of the series, and kind of what her experience as a child has done and how it's formed her as an adult. So I love the complexities with that regard. But when it comes to the stories, I do think there were times where it's like, okay, this is a bit too complicated. Bear in mind, at this point, I was probably about 15, 16 when it started, this era. So I felt that I could pretty much handle any form of storytelling. But yeah, it was a bit difficult. And I think Series 6, I think it got a bit too much with the whole impossible astronaut and the silence and everything like that.
I was on board with the concept of the impossible astronaut from the start, but at the same time, it just didn't, The
payoff wasn't worth it, I don't think. And
no.
I remember there was so many rumors about who Riversong was, and I was kind of pretty certain about who she was before the episode revealed who she was. And I was kind of like, okay, well, it's all built up to this mid-season finale, and it's kind of, we already kind of know, it was very much expected. So it felt like, rather than do that, maybe we could have done something else. But yeah, a bit iffy for me. But I did like, even though I don't think they executed it great, Series 7. They went to just kind of two-parters, just separate serials for every episode, which I thought was an interesting concept. I don't think all of them hit. But I liked that they tried something different with that, and I definitely liked the introduction of Clara and her relationship with Matt Smith. Yeah, and Matt Smith in general, I think he's really great, and he's only gotten better. It would be great to see him come back, and see how maybe a more mature Matt Smith influences his style of Doctor. But overall, it was very successful, massive amounts of fans, and Doctor Who spread further than it had before. I think America really got into Doctor Who more during this time. I think a lot of younger people got into the show, especially because of Matt Smith and Karen Gillan. I think it was a great time to be a fan still, and all leading up to that 50th anniversary, the hype, I mentioned Tayte before we started recording, the hype at this time in general was probably the biggest it got. And so, yeah, a really exciting time.
Yeah, I'm a bit mixed on the Moffat era, to be honest. I really liked Series 5 because of the fantasy fairy tale kind of vibe it gave off. But then when it got to Series 6 and 7, I really don't think the splitting it in two helped. I think with a lot of Moffat's later stories when he was showrunning, especially in Series 6, he loved to write himself into a corner and then try to get out with some impossible, complex plot line. It didn't necessarily always pay off. I mean, some of them are still really confusing. I often have to go back and think, oh, does that make sense? Do you need to link that into that? But Matt Smith as a whole, he's a really good actor. Like you said, he based a lot of his performance on Patrick Troughton, the second Doctor, and you can really tell that with his like clown-like behaviour. Matched that with Amy Pond, and then later Rory, and later than that Clara. He's a brilliant actor. It's a shame we only did get those 3 series with him. But then the hype going into the 50th, like you said, it was huge, and many people didn't think the 50th they'd be able to film or portray or show a good enough story because of all the hype. But it definitely paid off. The Day of the Doctor, I love it. It's a great story. And that entire week when they had all the specials, it was on every TV show going and being advertised. It was a really good time to be a fan. I loved it.
And the hype going into that seems to have continued into the hype for the 60th, at least I feel. Yeah, we talked about a couple of the companions there. We had Amy to start off with as this kind of doe-eyed child who's, you know, gets an experience with the Doctor, but then, you know, meets him later on in her life. And then we get Rory as well, who actually, and this, I don't know if this is a controversial opinion or not, but I prefer Rory as a companion to Amy. I think the interactions that Rory has with the Doctor are better, whether it is the initial bickering over who gets, you know, Amy, or whether it's kind of later on where they kind of settle, they understand their roles in Amy's life and they just vibe and get on as like good friends. I think that their relationship across the show works better than Amy's, which is, yeah, I enjoyed Karen Gillan's performance, and of course she's gone on to have like a massive career outside of Who, based off, you know, this is like a good base of it. But I prefer Rory as a companion, which is very interesting. We also get River Song, who kind of dips in and out. I know that River Song was introduced as a character with Tennant's Doctor, but we actually get to see a lot more of River Song. And River Song is one of those, a bit like Captain Jack, who continues over multiple Doctors. But her storyline is fascinating. I think it's done very, very well. And the mystery of the start of kind of her journey and what we get to see it develop into, I actually quite like and I can get on board with. You know, she's the husband of the Doctor, but also she's the one who kills the Doctor, or thinks that she kills the Doctor, and the world thinks that she kills the Doctor. And I think that's an interesting kind of way of putting things about and having that kind of character that the Doctor knows is not good for him, but at the same time is very good for him as a character and a role. And I can understand that romance more than, say, for example, Ten's romance with Rose. I prefer, you know, the romance that is built up here with Matt Smith's Doctor to River Song. We also get Clara at the end, who I think it's very difficult to define Clara with Smith, because I always think of her as, you know, Capaldi's, you know, companion, because of the role that's kind of built up with. But I guess it's a very similar situation to Rose, where, you know, she's a companion that crosses between multiple Doctors, and, you know, we get to see her develop across like the series in itself. So yeah, a quick discussion on companions. What do you think of this bunch?
Yeah, I kind of do agree with Rory to a point. I love his interactions with the Doctor, and I love his interactions with Amy. I think Rory as a character is kind of who I kind of feel like, you know, maybe a slot that if I was going to be in the TARDIS, maybe I would act like him a little bit. Like there's certain things that he says where it's like, oh, I totally feel you. Like I totally get that. I guess, you know, with when there's a TARDIS team where there's three, I love it when it's like, oh, they can all be chummy and friends and stuff. So when there's a relationship dynamic in there, I think it can be, whilst it can spout some good, you know, stories, I think it can also create friction that maybe I'm not necessarily looking for in Doctor Who. So if Amy and Rory had come in together as a very solid couple and that had just happened from the get-go, perhaps I would have liked, you know, them all there more. I think really the downside of Amy was just when she was, you know, trying to kiss the Doctor, and when that had happened, although I understand it from a character perspective, as a viewer, it wasn't something that I really wanted to see. But I think Amy as a whole is a great character, and I love what she did. And I think, again, similar to a Rose, but maybe not for general audiences as memorable. I think she brought a fresh energy to the show. You just had this great Doctor and Donna dynamic. By that point, it was like almost 2 years before. So we hadn't had a solid companion. So for someone to stay on for 2.5 series, I think was a really good thing as well. You know, I think not many people were just used to, at that point, a companion staying maybe for 1 series and going apart from Rose. And so, yeah, really interesting for those two. And then for Clara, again, it's that fresh energy, which I think by that point, I don't think they'd outstayed their welcome, but I was definitely ready for Amy and Rory to go when they did. And I was somewhat excited that it was happening halfway through. I thought, okay, well, this is a bit interesting. And I love a companion that does watch a regeneration and crosses over, because I think that gives the companion a unique perspective that not many of us have. So I would love to go back, because I've not seen Clara's episodes with Matt Smith since probably when they aired. So it'd be great to kind of go back, watch those, and then see the difference. Because you wait so long between seasons to actually get that next part. But I love kind of she did kind of idolize the Doctor a little bit and did fancy him. And yeah.
So I can give a unique experience here, because the last, or at least 3 of the last episodes I watched were The Rings of Akatan, which is a Matt Smith story with Clara. And then I've also watched like Flatline and Face the Raven and Heaven Sent and all of those later
what a batch
on.
of episodes. Jesus.
Yeah, I know, right? I've also seen Mummy on the Orient Express, which is one of the earlier ones with Capaldi with Clara. And the relationship changes massively. It's like Clara doesn't completely trust Capaldi's Doctor. She isn't quite sure on him yet, because she got to know this other person who was very kind of wide and open and showed her the universe. And now this new person who's come in is a lot more serious and takes a different tone with things. So it's a very interesting interaction, just to throw it out there between the two. And we'll talk about Capaldi in a second.
Yeah. Controversially, I don't think I have a favourite companion from the Smith era.
That's fair enough.
They're all equally good in their own rights, but there's not one I prefer over the other. You've got to feel bad for Rory, though, constantly being killed off and treated like dirt throughout the series. Clara, again, I agree, she's interesting, because character completely changes like halfway through. And then Amy, it's just Amy. She's there. She's basically a rose. Yeah.
Amy was. I remember people talking about Amy at the time, saying, "Yeah, possibly it's a bit like a Rose Mark II situation." But I'm glad they wrote away from that and made sure the characters are very defined. And I feel like they were defined. Yeah. I found it really hard picking a best episode. I mean, Day of the Doctor is up there as, just a great episode in general, but I can't pick it. I know it's in the Smith era, but I see it as a multi-Doctor storyline. I see it as, it's the anniversary special. It's its own entity. It's its own thing, very separate from the rest of kind of this kind of incarnation of the Doctor, because there are so many different characters in there. I mean, the War Doctor, you've got Tennant's Doctor in there, it's just, I think it's different. I can't put it as one of my favorite episodes. So I've got to go with either Vincent and the Doctor, which I love as just a standalone episode, has one of my favorite Doctor Who moments in it, gets me every single time, or The God Complex, which I think is one of the strongest single episodes in this era and in Who in general. Really love kind of the concept behind it. And I also love the fact that it ties into the whole Amy must let go of the Doctor. And it comes an episode after The Girl Who Waited, which is a fantastic episode to go with it. That double bill works so well. So that would be kind of my pick overall.
Yeah, I find it difficult just because there's not a lot of episodes from this era that I would go, oh yeah, I'll watch that right now. Again, we're getting to the point where there's many of these episodes I've only seen once or twice. So I am excited to go back to them though, actually, and to see what a 28-year-old brain thinks of it rather than a teenage brain. But yeah, I think if it wasn't Day of the Doctor, which would absolutely be my favorite one for sure. My mind
you can pick Day of the Doctor if you want.
No,
it's just me.
No, because I was thinking about it, but I was like, no, I think that's too much. It's too much of a cop out, I think. Although I will say the experience of seeing that at the cinema for the first time was just one of the things that will stick in my head. I took this sonic screwdriver with me to that, and all of our friends had my friend dressed up as Miss Foster from Series 4 and had her sonic pen and all of that stuff. It was a great time. But yeah, I think the snowmen sticks out actually. I can't really put my finger on why, but I think after the Angels Take Manhattan or Angels in Manhattan, I can't remember, but after that episode, which ends very heavily, you kind of just really needed a breather, and I loved it. It was like a mini refresh. You know, you had Clara had already shown up as Oswald or as Oswin in Asylum of the Daleks, which was one of the biggest surprises. And you don't get surprises in Doctor Who very often like that, where you are not you just had no idea that someone was going to appear, because she'd been announced, but it wasn't. They're like, oh, she'll appear at Christmas, and so the fact that she appeared early was great. But yeah, in the Snowman, I love her character in that. I love the Doctor's new outfit, my preferred outfit, my preferred TARDIS. That's probably my favorite TARDIS of the new series, is that actually. Yeah, just I think the Christmas specials by that point I hadn't enjoyed like the last two as much, and so the Snowman for me was kind of okay. Let's see where this goes. The Great Intelligence, which is a classic monster, but is never the same really. So it was good to have that. Loved Richard E. Grant. He's always excellent in anything that he's in. And he's just twisted in that. And yeah, I just like the vibe of the story and kind of what the ending of that story then does for the rest of Series 7 for 7B, and about the Impossible Girl arc, which I did really enjoy, even though I don't think I was fully on board with how it ended, but overall great.
I forgot to mention as well your favorite Doctor moment as well. I'll come back round to mine in a second.
I've got a favorite Doctor moment. I mean, I do look to the Rings of Akatan actually a little bit with the Doctor's speech. Now, I'm not one who loves when the Doctor has these big outspoken moments. I do prefer when he is kind of acting a bit more normal in terms of what he's doing. He might say a great line whilst talking, but having a proclamation or being having a bit of a god complex, I don't like that so much. I think sometimes it's like his regenerations. I'm not too big on regeneration speeches, but I think his speech in that is excellent in what he's within the confines of this story and the plot and what needs to be done. I just think the visuals are breathtaking, and even though I know a lot of people don't like that episode, but in terms of what it does and Matt Smith's performance, I think he's so down with his character at this point, because it is later into his tenure. Yeah, I just think it's fantastic. I was trying to think of other performances of his, but Matt Smith is wonderful across the board, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I'd struggle to think of a favorite episode, because it is such a mixed bag. One of my favorite moments, though, as the Doctor is in the when he's at Stonehenge, and all the spaceships are flying around, and he's doing the speech into the radio or tannoy system, and he just shouts that he's talking. That really sums up the Doctor to me. That was one of my favourite moments with him, definitely.
Yeah, was that from the Pandorica Opens? Was that the episode before? After? No, because the episode after is the Big Bang.
That's right, Pandorica Opens. Yeah.
Yeah, I was torn between that and the one which I went with, which is the Rings of Akatan. It's one of those where, after watching the episode the other day, and it was like, wow, this episode's goddamn boring. Just get to the speech, and then it gets to the speech. You're like, oh, this is amazing. This is like one of the best Doctor Who moments. It perfectly encapsulates what the Doctor is and who the Doctor is.
Yeah.
In a way that I don't think had been done before. I mean, Tennant's had a close call with the Titanic episode, where he kind of says, "I am 900 years old." You kind of, but this is kind of on a bigger scale, and this kind of, like you said, Sam, this is exactly where he is at this time. He has lost his friends. He's at the end of his tether, and this is kind of him saying, "Do you know what? Just I'm happy to sacrifice my life here." Because the universe is worth it, kind of thing. So yeah, good picks across the board there. We then move on to the Capaldi era, I'm going to come out the gate straight away and say that he is an underrated Doctor, and I know a few of my friends who may or may not be watching this have been sleeping on him and need to go and watch his entire era of the show. He came in as 12. Capaldi had been in a wild range of things. Nothing like Doctor Who, I want to add as well. A certain political drama which contains a lot of swearing may or may not be the only thing that I knew him from coming into this. A lot of people were very intrigued because he had an older look. He's a lot more of a serious actor, which is not to say that the other actors joining Doctor Who aren't serious actors, but Peter Capaldi is a more serious actor, as in like how he portrays himself and how he puts himself forward. So, of course, coming into this era, this Doctor is very strict. This Doctor is very mature and kind of comes across as almost like a teacher, which is, I guess, what they wanted to go with originally with Doctor Who. It was originally planned to be like an educational program where the Doctor would travel into the past and show history and stuff like that. It never was that show, but at least for Capaldi, his time on the show, which was 3 series long, he absolutely stole every single scene he was in. I absolutely adore his portrayal of the Doctor. I think it's so nuanced, and the way he holds himself on the screen. He has the best presence of the Doctor, I think, out of everyone. He knows he's the best person in the room, but it's the way that he holds himself in every single scene. And the fact of sheer look and surprise, all of the acting he does with just the eyebrows. And I know that the eyebrows were the first thing we saw of Capaldi's Doctor in the 50th special, but how on earth did that shot with the eyebrows come to, almost define his entire era when it came to his show? I've been gushing over him. Other people have turned to gush over him as well.
Well, I think everyone loves the attack eyebrows. Definitely a great trait to have. I was totally ready for Capaldi to be the Doctor. When he was announced, I was like, yes, this is it. I'm so happy. I think especially for someone who was a bit older. I know I said about Matt Smith, excited about being a younger Doctor, but then to have someone who was a bit more older than anyone that we've had in the new series, I was excited, and to know that he had been a fan of the show, to know that all of his experience, I was definitely ready. His vibe in the show is so interesting because he goes from not really totally knowing who he is, trying to figure out who he is, or at least trying to figure out who this incarnation of the Doctor is. And I like that he has that journey, because, it's not, I think it's definitely done more so in the new series, but regeneration is a traumatic thing. Your previous version dies, and now you're living as someone else, essentially, with all the memories of what's happened. So I love the journey that he has. I love the relationship between himself and Clara, what happens with it. It very much reminds me of, I will go back to classic just for a minute, but it's Colin Baker when he comes into it and Perry's the companion who was there at the regeneration, and she goes from gushing over a younger Doctor similar to Clara, and now has this very volatile, difficult Doctor who she can't truly trust, who literally strangles her in that. So it's kind of this distrust there, but then as their time together grows, so does their friendship and relationship, and they really lean on each other. And I see that with Clara and the 12th Doctor. And I love that so much. I love how much they depend on each other. And so that's what made it sad, even though I know a lot of people are ready for Clara to go. I think it's just so sad, Capaldi's reaction to her departure and what it does. I think it makes for some absolutely great moments. And, the last episodes of Series 9 are really powerful, and I think will always stick with me. Unfortunately, I did. This was the time where I think the hype really was dying down, and so I didn't actually finish Capaldi's era. I watched his last episode, but I did dip out during Series 10, which was a shame. And I'll definitely go. Like I said, I'm going to go back to all of these episodes anyway. But he is the Doctor, for me, is underrated. I enjoyed his performance, no matter what I think of the stories. His performance was always on point, and dare I say, after Tennant, he's probably my favorite incarnation of the Doctor from the new series. and I feel quite comfortable in saying that.
Yeah, definitely. I think he's my favourite New Who Doctor. I mean, before he came along as the Doctor, I only knew him from Tortured Children of Earth and the one guest role he did in Doctor Who back in the Fires of Pompeii. That's all I knew him from. And sadly, I think he got off to a bit of a rocky start, which alienated a lot of viewers into not finishing his era, not continuing with it, which is a shame because he really did get better and his era improved drastically to the point where when he was traveling with Bill and Nardole in his final series, it was some of my favorite episodes ever were from that series, just because how good of an actor he is. He was really good.
My actual favorite series of Doctor Who since the revival and everything like that was probably series 9, which was him with Clara, Clara's second series running with the Doctor, and I think it has genuinely some of the best episodes. There was one episode in there, Sleep No More, which I will skip. It's the only episode of New Who that I skip. Maybe a couple in Whittaker's era, which we'll talk about as well. And I know that as part of a series, you should watch every single episode. But with this series, it's so perfect. Going through like the Witch's Familiar episodes, the Under the Lake episodes. Towards the end, you've got the Zygon episodes. I quite like the episodes with the woman who lived, or the girl who died, the woman who lived. And then the strongest final episodes, I think, in the series. Hellbent wasn't as good as the previous episode, and I'm definitely going to talk about that in a minute. But as far as the companion is concerned, I genuinely think that Clara with Capaldi's Doctor may have been my favorite combination, which, if I was talking to a younger self, would be absolute sacrilege that I didn't like, Tennant and Rose at the time, because I absolutely adored that era when I was growing up. But you grow with time, and I genuinely think that the relationship they build up, that kind of low level of trust or no trust to start off with, and having to build again and kind of build that relationship in, and you can see the effect that he had, like he feels at the end when she dies in Face the Raven. And the best episodes of Doctor Who tend to be the ones where he's just gone and lost someone, because you actually get to see the real Doctor. And I think it's not one of my favorite Doctor moments, but I think the line, like, you're not talking to the Doctor right now, you're talking with me, kind of thing, is like, ooh, that sends chills down my spine every single time, because we actually get to see what the Doctor is really like. He is this magical man who goes off in a box, adventuring through space and time. He does make friends along the way, but do not cross him. Do not cross him. And those are kind of my favorite moments. You mentioned Bill and Nardole as well. I want to throw out a little line to Bill and Nardole. They are great companions, and I wish that they were in it for more than one series. I know that Nardole kind of starts not really kind of coming in every now and then he kind of becomes a little bit more permanent with Bill towards the end of that series. But I think Bill's a great companion. Sadly, she is a one-and-done series thing, which I guess it worked in the previous era, and I know that there was a change over the Doctors at this point, and they couldn't, I think that was kind of a showrunner change over Doctors. Are we going to keep the same companions? Probably not. We'll just do a complete reset with it and start again with the next Doctor and the next showrunner, which is a shame, because I feel like she should have been given more screen time.
Definitely.
But yeah, let's talk about those companions now. As I think a good batch of companions here, at least a really good batch of companions, and we do also get River Song kind of completing her journey in this one, unless we get to see more. I doubt it, but yes.
Yeah, I mean, Clara, I really liked anyway with Matt Smith, but I love her relationship with Capaldi in it, and it definitely is up there. Hopefully, when I rewatch the episodes, I'll have a more clearer sense of what I think now. But back then, I did appreciate kind of how extremely different they were, but how much of a connection they had. And I think that's always the best thing when you have two distinct different personalities and people who really attach themselves to each other. And we know in Doctor Who, by having that closeness and by being on this thing, it can be dangerous. But I love that. I loved her. I did love her arc with Danny Pink and that whole thing. And I thought it was such a shame. I felt so sorry for her. I felt so bad for her when he passed. But it was something that was really interesting for one of talk about a good Doctor companion moment when she's talking to the Doctor and threatening him with like the keys and stuff. It was it's very powerful. I think there's the stories in this era with Clara, at least anyway, and there's so much creepiness and so much kind of emotionally driven, probably more so than ever before. You get a lot from Clara. And so even though a lot of people were happy to see the back of her, I kind of was a little bit too, but I was also gutted because I think Jenna Coleman now, like did an excellent job, and I would have been happy to have her continue for another series. But yeah, we do go to Bill and Nardole, who I don't have too much experience with, but I really appreciated Bill's kind of background into the story, where she's come from, who she is now, and what she wants to do. And so, yeah, I really positive vibes from her from the few episodes that I saw her in. I did see what ended up happening to her anyway. I think it was a very interesting way to kind of write out a companion. It's sort of very distressing.
It's like the most distressing end to any companion. I know that she kind of gets saved by the Starfighter child thing, but at the same time, God being turned into a Cyberman is like the worst fate of any companion. God, awful, but very good writing to get us into that situation.
Oh yeah, I mean, I saw clips from that story and saw what had happened, and I actually couldn't believe it. It just seemed like something. I'd say that it was something that they wouldn't do, but we saw bloody Oswin as a Dalek, and Clara had been in a Dalek, and so it just seemed like
she dies in the most horrific ways,
Yeah, I'm like, okay, you're really putting your companions
both
through
her
it.
and Rory, they're just competing at this point.
Moffat has some form of vendetta against companions, I'm sure, but she seems like a really great character, and I agree. If there was a way that she could have gone over to Chibnall's era, and I do remember seeing at the time that people were like, oh, can't she just go on? It'd be really interesting to have her dynamic with Whittaker. What could have happened? So it is a shame, but I'm glad that that she has some appreciation. I hope when I watch the rest of her episodes, I get a better appreciation of her as well. Nardole, I don't really know how I feel about him. For me, I was always a little bit put off because it was Matt Lucas, and for me, he's such a recognizable actor that to put him in a companion role for me is a little bit jarring. So yeah, I'll see about him. When I get back to the episodes, I'll see what I think about him.
Well, Bill, definitely for me. Favorite companion. Bill and Nardole and Capaldi's dynamic just worked. I think they were brilliant together, very funny, but really friendly, well written, brilliantly acted. It's a shame that there were only one and done companions, because I would have loved to see more stories with them. Definitely.
Yeah, and it is a shame that sometimes you get that. And I know that hasn't happened much in kind of, this era of Doctor Who, but I always prefer characters where we get a lot more time to spend with them because then you understand them better. I feel like maybe my kind of love for Clara as a character is the fact that we see her over 2 Doctors and we see her change throughout that time. And even though her motivations at the start are very different from where they are at the end, you definitely see that development of kind of what she shapes up into being. And I can't remember who quotes it, but I remember, is it from Journey's End or one of those episodes where someone says, like, when you spend time with the Doctor, you change, like it changes you. And your life isn't the same, and it's very difficult to go back to. Let's go through best episodes. I'm going to throw out the honourable mention of World Enough in Time and the Doctor Falls as kind of Capaldi's last adventure. But I'm just going to go and I've been preaching this for years now. Heaven Sent is one of the best episodes of TV of all time in any show or anything like that. It is a glorious 45 minutes of television that I would throw on at any point, and has some of the best acting the series has ever seen. I think some of the best set design the series has ever seen. It's a solo Doctor episode, and I think it encapsulates Doctor Who perfectly.
No, that is a very good choice. I ended up thinking, Series 8 for me is probably the strongest series of the three to me. And it could have been Deep Breath. It could be Flatline. I love those episodes. It probably is Listen, which I think is more stereotypical what someone would choose. But I remember watching it in like university accommodation when it came out, and was just eating pizza and was just kind of like, what is going on here? And I just thought the concept was just so interesting, and I love Clara's role within it. I know people say she had a bit too much of a role in the Doctor's history, but I think what we got out of it was something that was actually quite beautiful as an episode. The ending of that episode always sticks with me, and even like the slightly misquoted "Fear makes companions of us all," which is something that William Hartnell said, are very, very similar in the first episode of Doctor Who. It really brought things full circle and just had a really nice touch to it. And the fact that it was something that stuck with the Doctor, and it just happened to be just a night when Clara was supposed to go out on a date, and it ends like with her and Danny Pincus. And I just thought it was a really good episode, and also very scary, with what could be under the bed, and then suddenly it's on top of the bed when you're looking under the bed, and it's I was scared of that. I actually didn't want to be alone. Bear in mind, I was 19, did not want to be alone. That was creepy. So yeah, that was definitely a favorite episode. But favorite moments might actually have to be either the Doctor and River Song in that beautiful end of the episode where he basically says, "I've got all this time with you," and then River Song's like basically crying, and it's just, I love that. But also in The Witch is Familiar with Davros, I love that interaction. The Doctor never has really that sort of personal reaction with Davros. It's always very heated, and the fact that even though Davros is just playing him, that whole kind of time for these two old men to basically, it's like the two remaining people in a war just going, yes, we got here, and we're both we've been affected so much by this. And I actually felt for Davros, and I was so annoyed when he was faking. But yeah, I thought that was just excellently written, even though I think that those two episodes could have been better. I think that moment always sticks with me.
Likewise, my favourite episodes by far are World Enough and Time, and then Hellbent, Heaven Sent, purely because of the speeches Capaldi gives in those episodes, and they're directed by Rachel Talalay, who's just an amazing director as well. So favourite episodes, but also my favourite Doctor moments come from those as well. With the speeches he does, it's great. I love them both. They're ones I would watch over and over again without getting bored.
The Doctor like trying to plead with Missy to join him. He thinks that he can get her to turn a corner, and he kind of ish does, but not quite fully enough. In that episode is fantastic. And for me, yeah, the bird speech at the end of the episode of Heaven Sent is just perfect. But sadly, Capaldi was once again not long for this world, and sadly we haven't seen him return to Doctor Who yet. Maybe in the future. I really do hope they bring him back for some kind of role in the future as well. I mean, he's in Doctor Who enough, isn't he? He's the Doctor, he's in Pompeii, he's been in Torchwood. So, across the entire thing, he's been in it a lot. We get another showrunner change. We get Chris Chibnall coming in. Now, Chibnall had done a few episodes of Doctor Who. I can't name them off the top of my head. But more importantly, he'd done Broadchurch, which had David Tennant in it. It had Jodie Whittaker in it as well. And that's kind of why he was brought on board. Now, I'm going to go off the bat straight away and say a lot of people turned off in this era. And I feel really sorry for Jodie Whittaker because I do think she makes for a good Doctor. However, the writing in the show during this era and the show running for this era have been some of the worst and most mishandled, and I genuinely feel like the show suffered massively for it. And maybe that's why everyone's so hyped about, Russell T Davies coming back, David Tennant coming back, because it's kind of that remembering of the golden era. It's that remembering of, oh, remember when times were good kind of thing. And sadly, under this era of the show, the ratings did dip. There were talks of it being completely cancelled throughout it. I don't think there's a single episode that rates kind of highly amongst the fans for anything. I think there's one or two. It makes it quite easy to pick out what your favorite kind of episode is, at least, and it makes it quite easy to pick out your favorite kind of moment from said episode. But this era of Doctor Who frustrated me. I brunted it. I watched through it. There were moments where I thought, do you know what? It's getting better. And I think it was a moment during watching through the Flux series, which is the most recent series, where I was like, okay, first few episodes, I can get on board with this. And then we had the Village of the Angels, and I was like, okay, this is actually decent. Okay, we've got a few things going. And then it just drops off a cliff towards the end. And that's how I felt with this entire era. Really good setup. Or, no, not really good setup. Okay setup. Okay episodes coming in. And then they just completely drop off a cliff when it comes to the finale or when it comes to the major plot beats. The big thing I want to talk about is the Timeless Children, which genuinely did make me question whether I would continue watching Doctor Who. And I'm hoping that I don't know how they're going to address it going forwards. I know that there are parts of Doctor Who where things are completely ignored. I'm fully aware that Sam probably doesn't have a clue about what we're going to be talking about in a second, having not seen this era. But the Timeless Children is a massive plot point that really didn't stick with me. The whole idea that the Doctor isn't just, a Time Lord who just ran away and, has adventures and has fun. No. The Doctor is the equivalent of Space Jesus and is like the core DNA to every single Time Lord, is the original Time Lord. And it's like, what are you talking about? Why is that a thing? We don't need the Doctor to be that level of godness. Like, Jesus, the Doctor's good enough with that being there. And the worst thing about it is there's such an easy fix for it, which is making the Master, the timeless child, which I thought they were setting up for, and I was fully on board with it. And then suddenly it was just like, no, this is like the worst decision they made in Doctor Who, like across any era, across any incarnation. And it really frustrated me, but I stuck with it. I watched around for the Flux, and looking back on this era, once again, frustrating, and I think it turned a lot of people off. But yeah, Whittaker, I think, was done very dirty with this role. That's the end of my speech. There we go.
Yeah, so I mean, I can't add too much in terms of, I'm not like when it comes to episodes, moments, companions. I'm really not going to be able to talk about that just because Tate's right. I haven't seen this era, and I think I look at this now very differently than I did when before Whittaker was announced. I was already kind of tailing off the show a bit. I think not burnt out, but I was like, you know what? I wasn't the biggest fan of Smith's era, Capaldi's era, whilst I love him and Clara, and then I was enjoying Bill. It was not a priority to watch the show, and I ended up just missing episodes and just never got back to watching them. Hence why I never really fully completed Series 10. And then, yeah, I think my whole thing with Chibnall's era in the beginning was just that it was very weird to go from we have 12 male doctors to a female doctor. And I know for a lot of people it was the main sticking point. For me, just from a story point of view, I found it, people are like, oh well, the Doctor's an alien, it can happen, but I was like, well, it's not happened before until only the past couple of years, where there's been talk of cross regenerations and stuff. So yeah, that was maybe part of the original reason why I didn't even try to watch Whittaker's era. But then even when I was thinking, oh yeah, maybe I could watch it, all the people was just saying, well, the story's not good, the writing is really not holding up. And to me, that was a shame, because I knew a couple of all the three companions in the first couple of series. I knew them all, the actors, prior to Doctor Who, so I was very interested to know what their characters would be like. And to find out that neither they were being underutilized or it was too many or that the stories themselves weren't working, it was sad to hear and didn't draw me in. Hence why I didn't even try to catch up. I was like, well, do you know what? Maybe it's not for me. Whereas, now I feel very differently about it. Whilst I still have my reservations, and when I do watch the episodes, I am going to be like, okay, let's just be prepared for what these episodes are going to be. I do want to see the efforts that were put out. There's a lot of people who work on this show. It is a show that I love. And yeah, I think Whittaker got such a bad rap, and it was very, very unfair. I'm very confident in the fact that I was never like, oh yeah, she's going to be terrible and all that. But I know a lot of people were saying that. But Whittaker's a great actress. A lot of good work under her belt prior to Doctor Who. So yeah, it's a shame that the era's had a bad rap, and that could fall on Chibnall. He was the showrunner. There's a lot of stuff that he decided on. The Timeless Children, I did find out about that later on, and again, as a fan of the classic series too, it felt like a disservice to what had happened to have this one person who decided to just do this to suddenly be so important. The Doctor's important because they help people and they travel and they're just there, not because they have they're already a high power by being a Time Lord, never mind a full of a background. So yeah, luckily I did watch Whittaker's last episode, and I did like Whittaker's performance. I loved the Master in that. I loved seeing classic companions Tegan and Ace in that. Yeah, I really enjoyed that last episode, and I think that's what also gave me hope that, oh, do you know what, maybe I actually will kind of enjoy some of the other episodes as well in this era. So yeah, you guys will have to kind of talk a little bit more about that. But I mean, I'm sure there's like any Doctor Who era, there are positives from it too.
Yeah, so Chibnall era, it's very Marmite-ish. I, for one, was all right with a female Doctor. I really didn't mind it. I shocked to begin with, but I quickly grew to like it. I know Jodie was a brilliant actress in Broadchurch. Chibnall was a brilliant writer in Broadchurch. Not necessarily some of the best Doctor Who episodes ever, but they were still really good. It just sort of fell apart, really. So the storylines were good, but they were either just too complex. A lot of explaining going on. The Doctor just explained everything. Overuse of the sonic screwdriver, but there were some really good stories, and there were some really terrible ones. And again, that's through no fault of Jodie whatsoever. She was just handed some really bad scripts, but they sort of redeemed itself with Flux, with Village of the Angels, but then went straight off of cliff again, and has recovered slightly with the Power of the Doctor. Really interesting mixed bag of a series or era, to be honest. Not my favourite one.
It's one of the only Doctor Who series where I go, maybe not. Pick and choose your episodes. It's so it makes me so upset because I love this show so much. To have that as like you can skip some of these kind of things, and I mean, I can literally go through and talk through like some of the episodes that are worth watching and some of them that probably aren't worth watching. And we'll go through that.
Easier to go through the ones worth watching.
Yeah, the ones worth watching. Woman Who Fell to Earth's decent. Rose is decent.
Yeah.
And then we scroll. It Takes You Away was okay, I guess. Maybe slightly. Spyfall was fun.
That was a good one, yeah.
The Nikola Tesla one was good. Fugitive of the Jadoon was okay.
Mainly because I'd say Joe Martin.
Joe Martin was fantastic in that episode. The Haunting of Villa Diodata, and then we're on to Flux. So the first 2 episodes of Flux, and then Village of the Angels, and that's pretty much it. That's it. And for an entire era where I've skipped over about 30 episodes there, that's awful. I've named about 10 that are worth watching. For 3 years of the show, that is it's frightening, to say the least. Like I said at the start, it makes it very easy to kind of pick what the best episodes are. Also, companion-wise, and we've been talking about how good the companions are over this entire era. And once again, like, I can't fully blame the actors for this, but these are the worst written companions in the show. I think there's only one where I can say, yeah, written well, and that was Graham. Like, Ryan was just a badly written character whose only trait I can remember is the fact that he's dyspraxic, and that's when he's in the show for 2 series, and the only thing you can say is, oh yeah, he gets his left and his rights mixed up.
But then they even forget about that halfway through.
Yeah, exactly.
Brought up right at the end again.
Even worse, Yasmin was in it for all 3 series, and she is so forgettable, and I just don't think that she brings any energy to the role, and that may be attached to that, to the writing, how she's been written or not, but genuinely, I think she had some of the worst line deliveries in Who, which is bad to say the least. I couldn't get on board with her companion, and of all the people to stay on, I really hoped that it would have been Graham, because actually he was quite a good companion. Having an older companion with a younger Doctor was an interesting dynamic, which I don't think we'd seen before. I know we'd seen Bernard Cribbins kind of coming in with, the Tennant era, but this was on a different scale. This was a really, really kind of fun dynamic of a person who'd seen life and done and explored and was just kind of enjoying his almost retirement in the stars. It was fantastic. Dan was an interesting character as well. Bringing a comedian onto the role will always bring something into it. But I mean, looking at that list of companions there, nothing really stands out. I mean, Graham doesn't even compare to any of the other previous companions we talked about on the show previously. He's just the best of this group, and that's awful to say, especially when and God, the cringe around the writing of calling them the fam and having fam being a thing throughout the. I mean, Doctor Who fans have spoken about it to death already, about how awful that is to be written in and stuff like that. But I want to hear your kind of thoughts and opinions, Dan, on the companions, and then we'll go into the 1 or 2 episodes we could pick for the best in the best moment.
Forgettable, really. I mean,
we're selling it to Sam here.
Graham, yeah, he was good to an extent. And there were some line deliveries or just the way he acted in certain scenes that I thought, oh, hang on, it's a bit strange. I don't think he would do that. But then outstanding in others. Dan, I liked Dan. It was a good fun. Ryan, yeah. I don't think he was even bothered. He didn't want to be there. I'm sure he did, but he just came across as he had much better things he'd been offered. Again, purely down to the writing. Maybe it's because there was too big of a TARDIS team and not everyone got the chance to fully develop.
I mean, you from a regeneration, a showrunner, to come in and have 3 companions off the bat, and I know that 2 of the companions knew each other, and Yasmin was kind of tacked on to start off with as the one who didn't really know them, and they were just all circumstance. But bold move, didn't pay off.
No,
I'm glad they've gone back to kind of with Ruby Sunday, it's going to be just 1.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I mean, it's happened before where there has been 3 companions, but it's always, I feel like showrunners or whoever's writing very quickly realizes the difficulty of having a Doctor and 3 companions. And I know in Patrick Troughton's first series and Peter Davison's first series, by the end of the series, at least 1 or 2 of those 3 companions are gone. And that was because they decided they needed to get at least someone out there because it was just too much. I think it's, from a visual perspective, I think it's really interesting, and to see that, you know, fans together, I think did look, oh, this could be really interesting. You've got all these different types of people together in the TARDIS going on these adventures, but I think the practicalities of it makes it very difficult to kind of have a focus. And even though I know there's fans and I've seen online, and I will, you know, defend anyone's right to enjoy, I know there's so many fans of Yasmin and her relationship with the Doctor and what could have been there. I know a lot of people felt kind of seen by those characters, and I really appreciate that the show, even though it may not have done things to its full potential, has given someone an idea of what, you know, either a relationship could look like or whatever, and I will respect the show for doing that. But it's a shame that a lot of people were then mad that that wasn't taken further, or that Yasmin wasn't expanded upon, or things like that, because, you know, these characters deserve to have their time to shine.
And that relationship was only really explored towards the end of her run. And I wish that if they went with that angle, they should have gone with it way earlier, or they should have at least left breadcrumbs. Instead, I mean, the start of the Flux series, you start to get inklings, but she's already been in the TARDIS for 2 years at that point. How has there not been any kind of lead up to that in the first place? Nothing to kind of, you know, just anything to kind of give us that spark or anything like that. The kind of companion relationship in the Whittaker era of the show was, you know, 13 going with one of the companions and then the other two doing their own thing at the same time somewhere else. And it would always switch between different people being with the Doctor and having those interactions. But for some strange reason, none of the characters had any chemistry like in the show at all. And it's a shame, because they could have written Yasmin to have good chemistry with the Doctor from the very start, and that would have built and that would have worked towards that relationship, especially because she was the companion who stayed on. And you also have that kind of slight romantic angle towards the end, which they were leaning towards, but they just didn't explore it enough at the start, and they definitely didn't develop it enough at the end for it to have a massive impact, at least for myself as a casual viewer. You're yearning for more. I know in certain parts of Doctor Who we've talked about today, you're yearning for less. This was definitely a no, you can go further with this one, you know, just give us some kind of character development here, which is a shame. We'll blast through this. Best episode was Village of the Angels. I think that's, I mean, Rosa was okay as well, but Village of the Angels is definite standout as the kind of best Weeping Angels episode past Blink, in my own personal opinion. Actually gave them something to do, a different take on, you know, the villain, and an actual scary episode. Very well put together, and I was shocked that, you know, they were able to pull that out in the middle of, you know, the Flux, which was one long story. It wasn't like, you know, small little serialized with that string leaning towards. It was just one big story, which I kind of enjoyed the format of. But best Doctor Who moment in this, I think, is probably the conversation with the Universal Frog from It Takes You Away. I think that was a really lovely interaction between the two characters, of a frog who just wants a friend in a parallel dimension universe, and the Doctor who, you know, loves to make friends, and that was her whole character, was based around making friends and being friends with everyone and wanting to try and unite the universe, but having to, you know, let that character go. It was the one moment of loss the Doctor kind of had to endure in the entire series, which is crazy.
Yeah, no, I definitely completely agree with both choices there.
Anyway, let's let's move on. So, very quickly before we go into our kind of final finale thing, we're going to talk very, very, very briefly about kind of the few times where different Doctors have popped up. So we've got the War Doctor, played by the late John Hurt, who I think was fantastic in the 50th anniversary special. We've all spoken about the 50th anniversary special a little bit already, so that's cool. We've got David Morrissey's Doctor from the next Doctor, which was very interesting to kind of see him pop up, and I think he did a decent job as kind of a Doctor who's not quite a Doctor, but also is the Doctor at the same time. And we also have Joe Martin's Fugitive Doctor from Fugitive of the Judoon, and also popping up every now and then in various different stories. Would anyone like to make a comment on any of those? You don't have to make a comment on all of them, just any comment at all.
I really like Joe Martin, and even though I've not seen Fugitive of the Dream, that name's just gonna get me out. I think she was in Power of the Doctor, wasn't she?
She was in Power of the Doctor. Yeah.
So I saw her
Her
in that.
storyline is not tied off. That's
No.
all I'm gonna say.
So I'm intrigued. I really like Joe Martin, and I think I would definitely like to see more. So I'm in for that. The War Doctor, John Hurt was amazing. I mean, I know the War Doctor was mostly out of necessity. They couldn't get Eccleston. I probably would have just been happy if they'd had Paul McGann, to be honest, and just done it with that. But, I'm not going to say no to John Hurt being the Doctor and having a great performance. And I'm glad that I've not listened to him, but I know he did some Big Finish as well. So it's really good that he managed to, put his stamp on it too. And yet David Morrissey, they said it at the time when the episode came out. I don't know if they even said it in like the Doctor Who Confidential back in the day, but that, you could definitely see him being a Doctor. He's a very well-respected actor. So yeah, I would definitely be down. If he came back as the Doctor, I'd be like, oh, right, great, sure. But yeah, I think all great performances.
Definitely, yeah. John Hurt was a huge surprise when that happened, so it was always nice to get an extra Doctor. And then Joe Martin, she was brilliant. She was a highlight of the whole Jodie Whittaker era, I think.
I would agree to that as well. She was a fantastic addition, and genuinely a nice surprise and plot twist. I know we've ruined it for Sam now that Joe Martin becomes the. I mean, you would have seen Power of the Doctor that comes in. Final talk before we go into our favorites overall is our Masters kind of talk. We've had a few different incarnations of the Masters in New Who. An interesting kind of villain over the years. I know we get like our classic villains, the Daleks. We get the Cybermen coming through. We've only had like technically two Auton stories, which is crazy, seeing as they were the ones who brought back in the revival. We do get random classic Who villains coming in and out, but the Master seems to be the one that kind of sticks with most. We've had Derek Jacobi, John Sim, Michelle Gomez, and Sacha Dhawan. Just very quickly, which ones are your favorites out of those? I know that Derek Jacobi has done. Did he do Big Finish as well? He's done some stories on that, which I hear are apparently like some of the best Big Finish stories to listen to. But which one is your favorite Master?
I mean, I was hoping that Michelle Gomez was going to be the Rani from Classic Who, just because I was like bringing that character back. But her performance is excellent. I can't fault it at all. She was so likable. She's so like she's crazy as well, absolutely crazy. And you know what, I'm into. I think with John Sim, I didn't really vibe with it as much, but with Missy, with Michelle Gomez, I was proper into it. And from what I've seen of Sacha as the Master, he's a fantastic actor too. And in the Power of the Doctor, I really liked his performance. I love it when they do take elements of the old Master, because the Master especially from 82 is so camp and funny. Even from, I mean, it's all camp and funny. The Master, I want to be scary but mostly camp. That's what I want from the Master. So yeah, I think that definitely the later performances. I think Derek Jacobi is a fantastic actor, and he's definitely got the voice for it too, for Big Finish. So yeah, his performance in Utopia was also amazing. I think we're very lucky that we've not had a Master who is bad, which is great. All brought different identities to the role, and which has really fit the era that they've been in. I do probably wish that Michelle Gomez would come back, though. I would love to see into different regenerated Masters come back, much like John Sim did, which was probably a big surprise for me when he popped up at the end of Capaldi's run.
Yeah, definitely. They're all great in their own unique ways. I absolutely adore Missy. She's just a wonderful, crazy character, and her redemption at the end, or is it a redemption? We're not entirely sure. Is brilliantly written, but then John Sim is great as well, and to see both of them in the same scene, just having enormous fun in again one of my favorite episodes. it's brilliant. I love them both.
Yeah, I think we've all nailed it there, because I think the Masters, there hasn't been a single bad performance, and Derek Jacobi, only tiny little role, only in really one episode, but of course has done more outside. John Sim was my master at the time, but now I'll actually say that I probably prefer Missy and Michelle Gomez, because I think her performance was electrifying across a couple of series, and Sacha Dhawan as well. I think a lot of people have been saying if there's one thing that can be carried over into the next era, they're really hoping to see more Sacha Dhawan, because he is even more twisted and deranged than the previous incarnations. He is like asylum level of insanity, and he brings that energy. Oh, proper terrifying. Especially when he's dancing to Rasputin with Daleks and Cybermen.
That was amazing.
I had to send that as a GIF immediately as soon as I saw it to some of my friends. As I watching this is what it's like watching Doctor Who, in 2022. You're kidding, kind of thing. Anyway, so we're now going to build our kind of perfect Doctor moment, shall we say? So we're going to go with our favorite Doctor, our favorite companion, our favorite episode, and our favorite moment. So we talked about them individually across all the different areas, but I'll go first. Capaldi is my favorite Doctor. I know I've got David Tennant on my wall. People can't see it, but I do have David Tennant on my wall. But I think Capaldi is the best Doctor. Tennant may be my favorite, but Capaldi I think is the best person to play Doctor. Companion, Donna, I think is the strongest companion. I was very tempted to go Clara, actually. But I think Donna is the best companion overall. Favorite episode, Heaven Sent. I've made myself very clear on that. And my favorite moment, I'm probably actually going to go with the Ring speech. I think the combination of those together would make for kind of an interesting Doctor storyline.
That's a very good setup. I'm really trying to think. I think my favorite Doctor is Tennant. Although I mean this one definitely is my favorite. But
New Who.
I know. But Tennant is Donna. I mean Donna is my favorite companion. Favorite episode. It probably is Girl in the Fireplace. Might just clinch it. I just love everything about it. And favorite moment, it's not even one that I've said, but I'm just thinking about it now, and I always remember it. It's in school reunion when the Krillitane, when Anthony Head is saying about to bring the Time Lords back, and then Sarah Jane is basically saying like pain and loss they define us more than happiness or love, whether it's a world or relationship, everything has its time, everything ends, and that has stuck with me since I first watched it, and I think it's something that you can. Obviously relates to the Doctor, but I think we as viewers can also take to our own lives as well. And I think that's when good storytelling hits, when it can affect how you perceive the world around you.
No, tough. Favorite Doctor, gotta be Capaldi. Although I do love Tennant as well and Eccleston, it's got to be Capaldi for me. Companion, I would agree with Donna.
Donna across the board.
I just think she's brilliant. I love her. I'm so glad she's coming back. Favorite episode? Oh, World Enough in Time. Yeah, just because how dark it is. It's one of my favorites. And then favorite moment. I do love that speech Matt Smith gives at Stonehenge. That is a good one. But it's so hard to pick any of those because I adore the show. It's my favourite. I love every moment of it.
We're talking across, since 2005, picking through all the moments, picking through all the series. But that is the end of our Doctor Who discussions stream. All excited for the 60th anniversary special, where we're going to be doing reviews of those immediately after the episode. Well, we're going to watch the Doctor Who Unleashed or Confidential or whatever they're calling it this time around afterwards, just to get a bit of insight into the episode. And then we're going to be going live for a review on it. So please go and follow us on our socials to be able to keep track of when we're going to be going live with that. So the Linktree link is down in the description below. And please make sure that you have commented below. What is your favorite, Doctor Who person who played Doctor Who, your favorite companion, your favorite era of the show, your favorite, episode and moment, talk about everything, create a discussion down there in the description. Before we go, I'm going to give our two esteemed guests, Sam Dan, our combination today, a chance to just have a chat about what is coming up with them at the moment. I'll put your socials on the screen at the same time, Sam, so you can go first.
Yes, I think I've been on Cinema Savvy mostly. I've done a lot of James Bond related things with Really 007 and License to Queer. But yeah, I've been on a lot of the Star Wars videos recently on Cinema Savvy, and I might be on some of the future Star Wars things too. And I've just done the Disney ranking with you as well, so definitely check that out. That was a really great video. Love seeing everyone's rankings there. And yeah, potentially more Doctor Who in the future too. But yeah, I post most of my stuff on Twitter/X still. So yeah, anything on that, just follow me there.
Excellent. And Dan, pitch yourself, go for it.
So I'm knee deep in editing a new film that should hopefully be released around Christmas time. You can see when it will be released on my Twitter/X at some point soon once it's all finished. Apart from that, I shall be hopefully appearing on some more podcasts available soon. But you'll most likely be finding me on X or Instagram shouting about Doctor Who. That's what I do.
Excellent. Well, thank you ever so much for having both of you on. That was an excellent discussion. I'm so glad that we have a thriving Doctor Who community here on Cinema Savvy now, moving forwards. And I guess we'll see everyone on the 60th special talking about Doctor Who. And, I'm so excited. I cannot wait. But anyway, thank you ever so much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.